Hello, and welcome to this presentation on how to fill out the Alma Migration Form. In this session, we will give a step-by-step explanation of how to fill out the Alma Migration Form, which is the first phase in the migration process from your current ILS to Alma. Once the form has been completed, it is read by the migration programs and the information automatically uploaded during the migration process. By the end of this training session, you should be able to fill out the Alma Migration Form and also work with the Migration Form data validation tools. Before we get started on the form, I want to mention a couple of resources that are available regarding this subject. It is suggested that you read the Getting Ready for Alma Implementation document available on the Ex-Libris Documentation Center under Alma Implementation. It is also recommended that you view the Introduction to Configuration video session before completing your migration form, as the mapping and migration of libraries and locations have implications for subsequent configurations. We will take a closer look at how the validation tool checks the migration form and alerts you to errors in data which would prevent the successful loading of your preferences during the migration process. The migration form is broken down into a number of tabs. In this session, we will cover the population of the questionnaire tab and provide instructions for filling out the various fields. We will also provide instructions for how to fill out the individual tabs on the migration form, such as the Alma Library tab, Alma Location tab, or Purchase Order Line tab. At certain points in time during the presentation, we will also provide some explanations about the migration processes that do not need customer input but are important to know. Please note that before migrating institutions to Alma, each ILS is analyzed and the migration form tailored to accommodate all the necessary fields in their data extracts. As we have used a generic migration form for this session, please note that your institution's data extracts may not contain all the tabs or fields seen on the various tabs of this presentation, or there may need to be certain fields added. You should refer to your Ex-Libris consultant for any questions you may have regarding this. The migration form is used by our automated migration programs in order to convert your data for use in Alma. Therefore, it is important that the data entered by your institution is valid so that the migration can continue on schedule. Whenever there are problems with the data inputted by the institution, we need to go back and have it corrected. To assist in reducing these type of errors, you will see that the first tab of the migration form, named Cover, contains a validation tool that helps ensure that your data is valid before you submit the form to Ex-Libris. Please note that when opening the form, you must enable macros, as you can see over here at the top, in order to use the migration form validation tool. This form should not be saved in any other format than Excel macro-enabled worksheet. After you have completed the form, click the Launch button from the Cover tab to begin the validation process. A list of self-explanatory errors, as can be seen over here, will appear in the window. You can then click on the Go To Error link next to the errors to go directly to the data element in question, where you can then make the correction. Afterwards, you can rerun the validation using the Launch button to confirm that it has been fixed. Over the course of the presentation, we will show examples of what would cause a data validation error and what needs to be done in order to correct it. Once you have corrected all the data errors, the validation tool will appear like this with no errors in the summary, and the error log will be empty. As you can see over here, there are no errors visible in the error log, and the summary up here will show that all sheets and all fields have no errors at all. At this point in time, the form is ready to be submitted to Ex-Libris for the migration operation to be started. Let's switch over and take a look at the cover page on the form. Over here you can see the sheet which contains the validation error, and here is the error description, and finally the Go To Error hyperlink, which will take you to the exact place of the error. As a quick example, we have one issue over here on the questionnaire tab, where a cell that should be filled out is empty. We'll go ahead and click on the hyperlink, and it'll take us to the cell containing the validation error. We will show a lot more examples of how there are data validation errors and what can be done to fix them throughout the process of filling out this form. The first thing that we need to do is to fill in the following 5 fields in the General tab of the Questionnaire tab. The codes for institution code and customer code are filled in by Ex-Libris. If you have received the migration form without these codes, please consult with your Ex-Libris contact to obtain them. So we'll go ahead and fill in over here the 2 codes. Institution name and customer name are mandatory fields and need to be filled in by your institution. Please note that the only time when the institution name and customer name are different is if you are part of a consortium. So let's go ahead and fill in these 2 codes. The time zone should be chosen from one of the options available in the drop-down list. In the event that you have left any of these fields blank, the validation tool will alert you that they require input. So in order to take a look at this, let's go ahead and delete the institution name. From here, we'll head over to the validation tool, click on the button, run it, and we'll see that an error has popped up that a certain cell shouldn't be empty. We'll go ahead and click on the hyperlink, which will then take us back to the exact cell requiring input. We'll enter in the proper details, go back to the validation tool, rerun it, and as you'll see, the next error that comes up is actually connected to a cell that will require input later on. We'll now take a look at a number of the fields that need to be filled out for the inventory section on the Questionnaire tab. For the first question of the inventory section on the Questionnaire tab, the question is whether your institution would like to migrate bib records which were imported from SFX. The only acceptable answers for this question are yes or no, which are available in the drop-down list. In order to decide whether your institution wants to do this, please keep in mind the following. If your catalog contains records imported from SFX and you also migrate bibliographic records directly from SFX, this may result in duplicate bibliographic records in Alma. The migration programs do not make any attempt to merge the 2 records into one. The default for this question is no, in order to avoid creating duplicate SFX records in Alma. If you answer no and the SFX records in your ILS are connected to a purchase order line, these SFX records are still migrated so that the purchase order can be migrated but are automatically suppressed in Alma to avoid end-user discovery duplication. If there are records from SFX in your ILS that have both electronic holdings and print holdings, you should answer yes to this question so that the print holdings are preserved. We're going to go ahead and enter in yes. For the next question, if you have a MARC organizational code, you can enter it in here, and it will then be used to construct the former system number in Alma. Please note that only one code is allowed in this field. This field is not mandatory to fill in, so the default is for the field to be blank. However, we're going to go ahead and enter in a code. For the next question of do you use internal system numbers in subfield W of linked entry fields, please note that the default for this field is no. If you answered yes, the internal system numbers are converted from your current ILS system number to the Alma system number. We're going to go ahead and enter in yes over here. If you answered no for the previous question, then you will leave this field blank. If you answered yes and there are internal system numbers in subfield W, you will indicate if they have a prefix that is used to identify these numbers, for example, ABC. If the system numbers in subfield W do not have a prefix, then you would leave this question blank. Since we answered yes, we're going to go ahead and enter one in. For use call number tags inserted from bib, the default for this question is no. If you choose yes from the drop-down, you should include the bibliographic fields with call numbers in the item extract, and the migration then determines the call number based on the hierarchy of the fields. If you choose no, only include the call number in call number item field in the item extract, and the migration determines the call number type based on the location of the item. We're going to go ahead and choose no. For the question of if call number item field is empty, then it should be filled in with the following text. The default for this field is blank. You can either leave it blank or provide a text string such as problem, missing, or any other text you might choose. You may decide to rely only on the call number item field from the item record by replying no to the previous question of use call number tags inserted from bib. There may be cases where this field is empty or blank. If you consider a blank call number field to be a problem, you can use this text to retrieve and correct these records after they have been migrated to Alma. The text that is placed there is put in the call number field for any empty call number field. The advantage of using text instead of leaving it empty is that text is easier to search for in Alma. If you want to leave the call number fields blank, you would leave this question blank. We're going to go ahead and enter in problem. For the final question in this section of indicate which 852 subfields should be used to determine unique holding records, the default subfields for this question is BC, which indicates library and location only, not just call number. If you would like to group all items on a single bibliographic record by location only, keep the default, as seen here, as BC only. Although not recommended, and only if you have many items on the same bibliographic record in the same location, but different call numbers within that location, and you wish each of them to have their own distinct holding record, you can choose from additional subfields H, I, and K and indicate those subfields in the call number data with a semicolon separator in that order. We're going to go ahead and keep the default of BC here. Let's take a look at the Alma Library tab. You will use this tab to create a list of libraries in Alma. Please note that at least one library is mandatory. First, we will enter in the Alma library code. Please note that it is restricted to a maximum of 10 characters. You should not use special characters such as slashes or spaces. Although mixed case is valid, it is not recommended. If you enter in a library code that is longer than 10 characters, as we'll do over here, you will see the following error message. That you have exceeded the maximum number of characters allowed. In the event that somebody were to try to copy-paste something that is longer than that, you would succeed in being able to put it over here. However, once you run the validation tool over here, it would flag it as well. Let's take a look at that. As you can see over here on the Alma Library tab, the value exceeds the defined max length. We'll go ahead and click on the hyperlink. It'll take us to the column where the problem is, and we'll be prompted to go ahead and change it. In this case, we're going to go ahead and enter in main, which is an acceptable entry. Get rid of this, and continue with the other columns. The Alma library name is how the library will appear in Alma and will be visible to the public. There is a maximum limit of 255 characters, and just like the Alma library code, if you exceed this limit, you will get a warning error and the validation tool will flag it. Let's go ahead and enter in an Alma library name. Let's continue to enter in information for the other fields. And we'll take the values from the line above. In the last field, you need to enter in the default language, which indicates the language of patrons and staff members if it differs for each library. We're going to go ahead and enter in English. For more information about language codes, you can click on the link at the bottom of the Alma library slide in the PowerPoint. Alma has two levels of location, library and also the physical shelving location. Libraries are higher level units which contain groups of locations. A list of Alma libraries must be created with locations on migration to Alma. Alma libraries serve as higher level repositories for physical records and also determine policy groupings for their management and fulfillment. The lower level physical location does not determine policy for an item and is only the physical shelving location or collection. All physical resources in your institution must belong to a library. During the migration process, you will group your locations into library groupings. The first step is to determine the list of libraries using this tab. As we will see in the next tab, you will now map locations into one of the Alma libraries you have listed here. Let's move over to the Alma Location tab. You will use this tab to map your locations to libraries in Alma. Please make sure to include all Alma locations of all types, including electronic types that may be ultimately deleted in Alma. They still need to be provided in the Location tab mapping. For location code, you should take the value from the location field in the item extract or the 852B subfield in the Mark Holdings extract from your current ILS. The Alma Me val not found line, as seen in cell A5 over here, is required to catch any location codes you may have missed, so make sure not to remove it. In location description, you can provide a description of the location for assistance in filling out this form. This column is not used in the mapping routine. For Alma library code, this is the library which will contain this location in Alma. This code must be one of the libraries you listed in the Alma Library tab in column A and available in the drop-down. So here you can see the libraries in the drop-down, which are based on the libraries that you've entered over here. For the Alma location code, you will enter in the new location code for this location in Alma. It can be a maximum of 10 characters and will raise an error if you exceed this length. Again, do not use special characters like slashes or spaces. You can use the same location codes in Alma that you used in your legacy ILS, however, this is not required. You may also use this form to consolidate locations. For example, the last three codes, as seen over here in green, are all mapped to reserves in Alma. For call number type, you would list the call number types for any newly created holding records based on the values for the 852 first indicators. If we cannot determine the call number type from the item record itself, we will use this as the default for all items in the location. Please make sure to choose one of the call number types available in the drop-down list. In the Alma location name column, you can place the description for this location as will be seen and used by library staff members. The same location name cannot be used for different locations in the same library, but the same location name can be used for different locations in different libraries. For Alma external location name, you should enter in the description for this location as will be seen by the public. The same name can be used for many different locations. In the electronic location column, please indicate yes or no. This will be used later on by the physical to electronic migration process to determine if a holding item or associated orders should be converted to electronic in Alma. We'll look at the P2E customer inputs on the migration form a little bit later in this presentation. In the Suppress from Externalization column, you should indicate if the location should be suppressed from being visible to the public. The items won't be marked as suppressed, but no holdings or items with this location code are exported to Primo Discovery. Please note that you should not leave the Alma location and library code fields blank. If you wish to stop using a location after migration, map the legacy ILS code to an easily identifiable code such as XXX, as can be seen over here, just in case any stray items are still in your legacy ILS database. Let's now take a look at a number of things that would potentially cause validation errors on this page. The first thing we're going to do is filter over here by library Alma code, which is going to cause the Alma Me value not found to go to the bottom of the list and no longer be in A5. In addition, as you can see over here, what we have is an Alma location of a certain type, storage, which are then mapped to Alma location names, which are different. We also have padding spaces, as you can see over here, there's an extra space after the word, and we haven't filled in the Alma library code for the Alma Me val not found line. If we go over to the cover page and we run the validation, you will see that we get 3 errors for Alma location. So for the padding spaces, we'll go ahead and click on the hyperlink, which will take us directly to the cell with the problem. Let's step into the cell, delete the extra space, go back and rerun the validation tool. As you can see, that error is no longer here. For the second error, a cell being empty, we'll go ahead and click on hyperlink and it'll take us over here, as we need a value for the Alma Me val not found. From the drop-down list, let's go ahead and pick our catch-all empty, head back to the validation, rerun it, and see that that one is gone as well. The final one is over here, where we have the same Alma location codes with different Alma location names. So we'll go ahead and take this one, change it over to books, come to the cover page, rerun the validation tool, and see that all the errors associated with this tab are now gone. For more information on avoiding errors on the Location tab, please refer to the Alma Migration Guide. While we're on this tab, I would like to add a little more information about the Alma Me value not found line. This line must be included at the top of the list of locations, in case any location codes were overlooked when completing this map. By default, the location code for this line is unassigned, which is the default catch-all in Alma in production mode. In our example, we used empty. In this case, the items inherit the configurations associated with it on the Alma Library tab. After the migration, you can search for items in the unassigned location and correct the records appropriately. Okay, let's move over to the Item-Based Status tab. You will use this tab to map your item statuses to Alma. This tab is not mandatory if you do not want to migrate your item statuses to Alma. The value in the status field is from the ILS item extract. The status typically indicates what is happening to the item, such as binding, in repair, lost, or any other statuses. In the description column, place the description of the status code. The text in this column will be written to the internal note 3 in the item in Alma. For the base status column, in Alma, the base status indicates whether or not the item is on the shelf. For example, library use only is on the shelf and given a 1, but withdrawn is not and will be given a 0. The 2 cells highlighted in green, as we've just shown, are examples of the 2 different base status types. Alma has a process type that indicates the status of an item depending on the Alma workflow, such as item is on loan, item is sent to the bindery, but the process type is dependent on the corresponding Alma workflow. For migration, all item statuses that are indicated as not on the shelf from your current ILS are given the process type of technical, and the item status from the description column is written to an Alma item note. By default, this is internal note 3, but can be changed on the item tab of the data delivery form. Post-migration, you can then search for and reroute items with values in Internal Note 3 to the appropriate handling or department in Alma. Let's take a look at a number of things that would cause validation errors. First of all, as you can see over here, we have a padding space. In addition, we could also go ahead and add a duplicate value. From here, we'll go ahead to the cover page, run the validation tool, and see that the following two errors were flagged by the tool. Let's click on the hyperlink, go ahead and fix these two by removing the padding space and deleting the duplicate value. We'll now head back to the cover page, rerun the validation tool, and the errors are now gone. Let's take a look at the Item Type tab. You should use the Item Type tab to migrate your current ILS item type to the Alma item type. This tab is mandatory. Please note that these types are used only for exceptional item policies in circulation in Alma, and that typically in Alma, circulation policy will be determined by location-based fulfillment rules covered by the configuration form. For item type, this is the value in the item type field of your current ILS item. The item type is used to differentiate between items when determining how something circulates. Description is the description of your current ILS item type and for information use only. This column will not be used during the mapping process. Alma item policy. This is the Alma value for the item type. This column can be used to consolidate item types if desired, such as can be seen in the cells highlighted in green over here. For Alma description, this is the description that is loaded into Alma as the display text for the item types. These values can be changed after migration. Please note that it is important that the Alma description match the Alma item policy for the same type, or the validation will flag this as an error. Let's take a look at an error like this over here. As you can see, for the Alma item policy, we have 7-day and 7-day, but over here for the Alma description, one of the values is 7, while the other one is 7-day. In addition, we also have a padding space. Let's move over to the cover page, run the validation tool, and as you can see over here, for item type, we have both padding spaces and also Alma codes that don't match the descriptions. We'll use the hyperlinks to go over to those problems, remove it, change this value as well, head back to the cover page, rerun the validation, and see that it's now corrected. This covers the section for inventory in the migration form. You can refer to the Alma Migration Guide document for more information about the migration of inventory to Alma. Now let's move back to the Questionnaire tab and discuss the fields related to fulfillment. Please note that patron records are required and must be supplied by the institution if loans, requests, or fines are being migrated. Patron records can be updated post-migration with the patron update routines. I would like to remind you again that before migrating institutions to Alma, each ILS is analyzed and the migration form tailored to accommodate all the necessary fields in their data extracts. You should refer to your Ex-Libris consultant for any questions you may have regarding this. Okay, so the first question is, which identifier should be used by externally managed patrons to identify themselves and log into Primo as the user's primary identifier? The default for this field is University ID. When using the field mapping form, you should map the identifiers exported from your ILS into the following list seen in the drop-down. This could be University ID, barcode, or additional IDs 1 through 4. Select here the identifier which should be used as primary for external patrons. To decide if a patron is external or internal, see the Internal-External question on the User Group tab, which we'll take a look at shortly. Please note, the identifier selected here is used as the match point for externally managed patron records to match up with an external authentication system such as LDAP or Shibboleth. There is no password for external users. So we're going to go ahead and leave univ ID. For which identifier should be used by internally managed patrons to identify themselves and log into Primo as the user's primary identifier, we also have the default as univ ID. When using the field mapping form, you should map the identifiers exported from your ILS into the following list seen in the dropdown from the previous question. Select here the identifier which should be used as primary for external patrons. Please note that the identifier selected here is used by patrons whose only authentication is the Alma patron database. The identifier here is the username, and the password is set on the next question. For how should we construct a password for internally managed patrons, the option that is selected here is used by all internal patrons as their initial password. When logging in for the first time, internal patrons use the identifier selected in the previous question as the primary ID, and the default password is what you select here. There are 4 options to choose from in the drop-down list. For last name, in this option, the patron's last name is placed in the password field. For primary ID, the identifier selected as the primary ID is placed in the password field. For constant, it would be a constant of your choosing which will be used. If you use this option, you will enter in the text in the next question. The last option, from export, is where you will use the value from the password field in the patron export. If this option is selected, the password must be sent unencrypted. Please note that externally managed patrons do not use a password for authentication. Since they are externally managed, they use an external authentication system such as LDAP or Shibboleth. The default for this field is last name. However, we will enter in constant so we can show an example for the next question. If you desire a default password other than the options listed in the drop-down box, please contact your Ex-Libris consultant. If patron password selection equals constant, enter in the string here. Please note that it is likely that the internally managed users use the Alma patron database for authentication. Therefore, a default password must be assigned for these users. Because we chose constant in the previous question, we're going to go ahead and enter in the word member in this field. Here we're asked to enter a 2-letter code for the default conversational language for your users. The default for this question is EN, or English. As mentioned earlier, for a list of ISO language codes, please refer to the link provided in the migration guide. We're going to go ahead and enter in EN. For currency for patron fines, you should use the 3-letter code for the currency used for patron fines. For a list of valid codes, please refer to the link provided in the migration guide. The default for this question is USD. For this question of use a map for the home library to campus code migration, you should select yes for this option only when you maintain and use different values in the home library field in your data extract to distinguish between different user groups for resource sharing activities like interlibrary loan and borrowing. If you choose yes, fill in the mapping from the home library to the Alma campus code field on the campus code tab. When choosing no, all users are simply considered part of the same group for resource sharing activities. The default for this question is no, and we'll enter in that value as well. For use course reserve branch to course unit map, you should answer yes to this question if you are migrating courses and you have multiple staff units which manage different groups of courses. When answering yes, also fill out the mapping from the ILS branch field to the Alma course unit field on the Course Unit tab. When no, all courses are assigned the same course unit, accessible by all staff who are allowed to work with courses. The default for this question is no, and we'll enter in no as well. For this field of Request Default Destination Library, if the request file does not contain a destination library or location, we will use this library as default. The value must be from the list of libraries on the Libraries tab as reflected in the drop-down list. I would like to switch over to the Cover tab with the Data Validation tool and show a number of errors that could come up while filling out the questions in the Fulfillment section. Let's go ahead and click on the Launch button. As you can see right now, there are 3 errors for the Questionnaire tab. If we move over, you can see that they have to do with blank values in acquisitions, which we'll cover later on. However, if we go up to Fulfillment and say, leave this field blank and maybe enter in lowercase currency, if we go back to the Cover tab and rerun the validation, we'll see that we have value not from required list. If we go to the error, you can see that the lowercase does not work as a 3-letter code and it must be uppercase. We'll go ahead and enter in USD. Come back, rerun the validation, and that error is no longer here. Let's move over to the User Group tab. The User Group is used to distinguish groups of patrons from each other in determining different levels of circulation policies. Typical user groups are faculty, staff, or undergrad, but can be many others depending on the user groups you have. If patrons are being migrated, then this mapping table is mandatory. Let's take a look at the fields over here. For the P-type field, you should enter in your current ILS patron type code found in the P-type field of the patron extract. For description, you can enter in a description of your current ILS patron type code. However, this is for information purposes only. This column will not be used in the mapping to Alma user group. The Alma user group code will act as the map group code in Alma. You may choose to use the same codes that you used in your current ILS, or you may choose to use different codes. You may also choose to consolidate groups if, for example, having all undergraduate patron types map to undergrad in Alma, such as we have done here. The Alma user group description contains a description of the Alma user group. This description is loaded into the Alma code table as the description seen in the user interface. This description can be easily changed after migration. For the internal or yes or no column, Alma categorizes users either as internal or external. External patrons are managed by an external system, such as through a regular load from the bursar's office. Internal patrons are created and managed internally. Examples of internal patrons are community bars or alumni. When choosing yes, all of the patrons in that Alma user group will be categorized as internal. When choosing no, all of the patrons in that Alma user group are categorized as external. Let's take a look at a number of things that would cause validation errors on this tab. First, we have a situation where the Alma user group description does not match the Alma user group code. This can be seen over here. Second, in the internal-external column, somebody has pasted in a lowercase y instead of choosing either the uppercase yes or no into the internal column. When we move over to the cover page and run the validation, you can see for the user group tab, there are 2 errors that have been flagged. Let's click on the hyperlink, move over here, and we can go ahead and change this to an acceptable value. Rerun the validation, and see that that one is no longer in the log. And for the second one, we can go over here and see that the Alma user group code does not match the description. We'll go ahead and change this to graduate as well. Head back over to the cover page, click on the validation button, and that error is no longer present either. Let's take a look at the User Block tab. A user block is assigned to patrons that have a temporary suspension of borrowing privileges. This mapping table is not mandatory. The MBlock column will contain your current ILS patron's block code as found in the MBlock field in the patron extract. The MBlock description is a description of the patron block's code, which is for information purposes only. This column will not be used in the mapping. The Alma user block code is the block code as desired in Alma, and the Alma user block description is a description of the block code in Alma. The value in this column is loaded to the server in the user block code table and can be easily updated after migration. The Campus Code tab should only be used if you answered yes to the question on the Questionnaire tab of whether to use a map for the home library to Campus Code migration. For the Home Library column, this would be the value of the patron home library as found in the Home Library field of the patron extract. For the Home Library description, this is a description of the Home Library field and for information purposes only, and will not be used in the mapping. For the Alma Campus Code, this is the Alma Campus Code desired. You may map the codes one-to-one, or you may use this map to consolidate codes if desired. And for the Alma Campus Code description, you would provide a description of the Alma Campus Code, again, for informational purposes only. This field will not be loaded into Alma. We'll be leaving this tab empty because we answered no in the Questionnaire tab. If campuses are relevant to your institution's migration, please refer to the Alma Migration Guide. You will use the User Statistical Categories tab. If you use statistical categories in your patron records and you want them to migrate to Alma, it is possible to have multiple fields that contain statistical codes. For statistical category, you should list all of the values from the fields you choose to put into the statistical category mapping. In the description column, provide a description of the individual categories for information purposes only. This field is not used in the mapping to Alma. For user stat category code, this will be the Alma statistical category code desired. This code is used to retrieve groups of patron records with various reporting tools. You can consolidate statistical categories if you would like. For user stat category description, you would provide a description of the Alma StatCat code. This value is loaded into the code table for user stat categories. This description can be easily updated after migration. In the example seen here, you can see that the institution has chosen to consolidate statistical categories for their categories 20 through 25 in their current ILS into a single one in Alma. For the Course Unit tab, you would only use it if you answered yes to the question on the Questionnaire tab of Use Course Reserve Branch to Course Unit Map. The Alma Course Unit is used to assign separate editing privileges to staff members who maintain course reserves information in administratively separate sections of the library. It is strongly recommended to use a single course unit unless there is a pressing need for multiples. For branch, this is the value of your current branch library, found in the branch field in the Course Reserves extract. For branch description, you'll provide a description of the branch field for information purposes only. For the Alma Service Unit code, you would provide the desired code value for the Course Service Unit in Alma. You can collapse the branch values if desired. And for the Alma Service Unit name, you would provide the name for the Course Service Unit in Alma. This field is used to create a code table that is then loaded into Alma. In this presentation, I have briefly gone over the columns. However, we will skip adding any data. In the event that your institution decides to migrate courses, please refer to the Migration Guide for additional information. Let's take a look at the Acquisition section of the Migration Form. For acquisitions, you would select yes or no depending on whether or not you have contracted with Ex-Libris to migrate any acquisitions data. If you have answered yes to this question, then you will need to answer the next few questions. Before we fill out either one of these fields, please note that there are a few options for Central in Default Order Library. The location field in the data extract specifies the order location for orders in your legacy ILS. The migration attempts to map the location field to the corresponding Alma library. If you wish to override this location field, and instead assign an order library to all orders migrated, then fill in the value for the Central Order Library question. Otherwise, if you want to use the location field to determine the order library, leave the Central Order Library blank and fill in a value in the default order library location. In this case, the migration attempts to determine a library based on the location field, and only when a library is not specified or a mapping is not found does it use the default order library as a second choice. So we've entered in main over here, but now we'll go ahead and enter in main over here for default order library. In the event that you want to have all your purchase orders go to a default central order library in this place, please note that only one of these two questions can be filled in. For default language of conversation with vendors, we need a two-letter code, so we'll go ahead and enter in English. For the currency question, you will use this place to list the currency used for all of your funds. Orders can have other currencies and be translated to the default currency, but funds must have a single base currency. The currency should be a three-letter code just like the one used for patron fines. The default for this question is USD. In order to have functioning ledgers, fiscal periods are required. In this field, you should specify your fiscal period in the format of date, month, cycle. For example, a one-year fiscal period starting on January 1st would be indicated as follows. A one-year fiscal period starting on July 1st would be indicated like this. The default for this field is over here with the fiscal period starting on July 1st and would last for 1 year. Please note that Alma currently supports one-year fiscal period cycles. For default claim period, if the claim period is empty and the incoming vendor or order record, you would use the value here as the default. Let's take a look at the Purchase Order Reporting Code tab. You will use this tab if you wish to map values from the form field to the Alma Reporting Code field. This tab is not required. When an encumbrance transaction is created in Alma, the acquisition staff can classify the transaction with a reporting code. Later, reports can be used to retrieve transactions with the same reporting code. Reporting codes are often, but not always, used to classify a purchase as a serial, monograph, or electronic for state or nationwide reporting purposes. In the form column, you will provide the value of your current ILS order format found in the form field in the order extract. In form description, you will provide a description of the form field for information purposes only. For Alma reporting code, you will provide the desired code value for the reporting code in Alma. You may choose to consolidate form values if desired. In the Alma reporting code description column, this will be the name for the reporting codes as they appear in Alma. This field is used to create a code table that is then loaded into Alma. The value can be easily changed after the migration process has taken place. Let's take a look at a couple of things that would cause validation errors on this tab. The first issue, as you can see, is a padding space, which we have over here in the cell selected. And the second issue is that duplicate values have been entered in by the institution. When we switch over to the cover page and run the validation, you can see that these errors have been flagged. Let's go ahead and click on the hyperlink, where we're brought to the cell with the padding space. We'll go ahead and delete it, and we'll also get rid of the duplicate line. When we go back to the cover page, rerun the validation, you can see that the errors on the page have been corrected. You would use the Purchase Order Claim tab to set different claiming periods for orders migrated to Alma. The tab is mandatory if you are migrating orders. However, if you do not wish to map claiming information from your current ILS, fill in the default values in the Alma Me Val Not Found line only. For the claim column, you would fill in the value of the ILS receiving category, which is found in the claim field in the order extract. In the rush column, you would put the desired claim period in days for rush orders. And in the regular column, you would have the desired claim period in days for any regular orders. Let's take a look at one familiar error that would cause a validation problem. Over here you can see a padding space. We'll go over to the cover, run the validation, find that a padding space error is on this tab. We'll go to the error, correct it, go back to the cover page, rerun the validation, and the error is no longer in the log. The purchase order entry point is a value used to determine where a purchase order falls in the workflow in Alma. The PO entry point is mandatory in Alma, so the Alma Me value not found line is required to catch any statuses that may not have been found in the map. Additionally, since all possible values for the statuses fields in originating ILSs cannot be accommodated, every original status value is placed in the note field for each individual migrated order for reference after migration. In the status column, you will provide the possible values for the order status in your current ILS found in the status field in your order extract. In description, you will give a description of the status field for information purposes only. This field is not used in the mapping to Alma. For the PO entry point, you will give the desired order status in Alma. You need to select from one of the values in the drop-down box. For more information about what each one of the PO entry point values are, please refer to the Alma Migration Guide. Let's take a look at a couple of validation errors that we have on this tab as well. As you can see over here, there are multiple padding spaces, and we also have duplicate purchase order entry points listed on this tab. When we go over to the cover page and run the validation, we can see the two errors in our log over here. We'll click on the hyperlink, remove the padding spaces, delete the duplicate, go back to the cover page, rerun the validation, and see that they're no longer in the log. The PO line type is used to define the line type of the migrated order. The purchase order may move through Alma workflows differently according to what type of item is on order. For example, a monographic order is opened, sent to the vendor, received, invoiced, and closed. However, a serial order may be received and invoiced many times and may remain open indefinitely. This tab is mandatory if you are migrating orders. Make sure to include a line for Alma Me value not found, since this field is mandatory in Alma. For the order type column in the migration form, provide the value of the order type field in your current ILS found in the order type field in your order extract. For order type description, provide a description of the order type field for information purposes only. And for PO line type, you would provide the Alma line type value. You need to select one of the following line types from the drop-down list. For more information, please see the top of this slide, the top of this tab, for which PO line type should be chosen. You would use the Purchase Order Acquisition Method tab to determine the acquisition method of an order in Alma. The acquisition method is an indication of how the order is acquired. Possible values for the acquisition method are purchase, approval, gift, vendor system, depository, and exchange. The acquisition method is determined by looking at values in the acquisition type field, plus the order type field if it is necessary to distinguish orders with the same acquisition type. The purchase order acquisition method is mandatory in Alma, so the Alma Me value not found line is required to catch any values that may not have been found in the map. Also, since all possible values for the acquisition type field in your current ILS cannot be accommodated, every acquisition type value is placed in the note field for each individual migrated order. For the acquisition type column, you would provide the value of the acquisition type field in your current ILS. For the acquisition type description, you would provide a description for the acquisition type for information purposes only. For order type, this field is not mandatory for mapping and may be left empty if not needed. However, you would use the order type field here only if you needed to distinguish between acquisition type for an order. For order type description, you would provide a description of the order type field in your current ILS used for information purposes only. And the purchase order line acquisition method would be the acquisition method in Alma. You must select one of the values from the drop-down list. For more information about the available options in the PO line acquisition method, please see the top of this tab or refer to the Alma Migration Guide. In the Vendor Claim tab, you will provide the default claim cycle for vendors in Alma by setting the mapping to the claim cycle field in your current ILS. This tab is mandatory if you are migrating vendors. However, if you do not want to map claiming information from your current ILS, fill in the default values in the Alma Val Not Found line only. In the claim cycle column in the migration form, you would provide the value of your current ILS claim cycle, found in the claim cycle field in the vendor extract. In description, you would provide a description of your current ILS claim cycle field for information purposes only. And in Alma claims, you would provide the amount of time in days before sending a claim. This value is used as a default for orders opened for this vendor. Let's take a couple of things that would cause validation errors on this tab. The first one is a padding space, can be found over here, while the second one is the missing Alma Val Not Found value in cell A5. When we move over to the cover page and run the validation, you can see that the two errors are listed over here. So let's use the hyperlink to first go to the padding space and correct that. And for the missing value, we'll go ahead and take it from our comment over here, place it in there, go back to the cover page, rerun the validation, and see that the error is no longer there. You can refer to the Alma Migration Guide for more information about the vendor migration processes, including funds, encumbrances, transactions, and other related information that do not require your input. In the last section of the migration form, we'll discuss the P2E process. During migration, all resources are categorized as physical in the database, even if the record represents an electronic item. All records are converted to Alma as physical initially. A second process then converts records identified as electronic to the electronic format. This is done by your institution providing Ex-Libris with a list of records that are identified as being electronic as part of the data delivery in a certain format. The following three questions need to be answered on the questionnaire tab for P2E. The first one is which holding or bib field stores electronic link information. In this field, you will provide a 3-digit MARC field code plus a subfield. Only one subfield is allowed here. The default is 856U, so let's go ahead and enter it in over here. The second question is which holding or bib field stores electronic provider name information. In this field, you will provide a 3-digit MARC field code plus a subfield as well, and only one subfield is again allowed. The default here is 856M, so we will go ahead and enter it in. For the third and final question, which holding or bib field stores electronic link public note, you would also provide a 3-digit MARC field code plus a subfield. Again, only one subfield is allowed here. The default is 856Z, so we will go ahead and enter that in as well. For more information on the electronic migration approach to Alma, please refer to the Electronic Resource Handling in Alma Migration document located on the Documentation Center under Alma Migration. Please remember that for the P2E process, the information is based on electronic locations which were specified in the Alma Locations tab. There was a column that said electronic location where you will identify whether or not the location listed is electronic or not. Please see Electronic Resource Handling in Alma Migration for more information about the P2E process. Once again, as we've mentioned in the past, if your institution's data extract has different fields than the ones you saw in this presentation, please refer to your Ex-Libris consultant for any questions you may have regarding this. This brings us to the end of this presentation. In this session, we covered how to fill out the migration form and the use of the data validation tools. Thank you very much for viewing this session.